everyone, welcome to Straight Talk with Steph, with me, Steph Beatty, property investor and mentor. I'm here today with my other half, probably about a half, Phil Walker, who is also my business partner. We've been together for 10 and a half years and we've been in business for maybe 6, I think. So this podcast is interesting. We've never done this together. It's a bit strange, but out of the comfort zone for both of us because it doesn't feel natural. But I actually put it to everybody on Instagram and I said, do you want to ask us questions about our property journey? And I think this would be really helpful for people, especially if you're just starting out or if you just want a bit of a laugh. We don't take life or each other too seriously, probably me more than Phil. But yeah, so I've got a load of questions here. You're ready to be grilled?
No.
But I grill you every day.
Interrogation rather than a podcast.
So, people are asking us, like, where did it all start? So, do you remember it was a snow day? You fell asleep on the couch?
I do remember it was snowing because I drove and I remember driving in the icy conditions.
Yeah.
To that place in Rossett. Was it Rossett?
Yeah, it was a hotel, wasn't it?
Yeah, hotel in Rossett. Cold, snowy night, icy. And remember it was... what I do remember of it is pulling into the car park. And I remember getting out and we had to be careful walking on the ice.
Yeah, I was grabbed hold of you because I was going to fall over.
Yeah.
So what happened was we saw Phil fell asleep on the couch on the snow day. I was on the laptop booking a holiday to go and see my best mate Amy, who just moved to America.
Yeah.
And then this ad popped up on Facebook and said it was like a 2-3 hour seminar, how to make money from property. And we thought, wow, we've just done it with this house that we spent 2.5 years renovating, made loads of mistakes. Would have made more if it wasn't for your dad.
Homes under the hammer.
Homes under the hammer.
How hard can it be?
Yeah, they're all making loads of money, so fuck it, let's just do it. So yeah, we drove to this hotel. Well, you drove. Even though I wanted to get to the hotel, I was still secretly hoping it'd be snowy enough for me to not have to go to work the next day. I think I did though. So we did the 2-3 hour seminar. Do you remember the sales pitch that they gave us?
I do, yeah.
What about the first 10 people at the back?
First 10 people run to the back of the room and sign up, get a heavy discount, was it? Or something like
yeah, it was like $1,000. And do you remember I only had one credit card with 1,200 quid on it? And I was like, it's $1,000.
Yeah. I love what I do remember is when we first sat down in there. And I remember you sort of grabbed my arm and just whispered over, because I think the presentation might have started by then. Let's just listen, and we know why we're here, but let's not be caught with the with the hype and the upsell.
Because we knew it was coming.
And then I do remember, obviously I don't remember a lot of in between in the presentation, but then I do remember at the end, you were grabbing the same arm, the same way, saying, shall I go? And I was just like, yeah, just go.
And
as long as I can get the blood back in my arm.
It was like £1,000 for like 3 days in Manchester. And I remember saying to the woman, does that include accommodation? And she was like, no.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, that's where it all started. And then from there, we ended up going to the 3 days.
Yeah, in Manchester, yeah.
Do you remember that awful hotel we stayed in? And the walls were paper thin.
Yeah, and then from then on we vowed if we ever did anything like that again, we'd stay in the hotel that the actual venue and the training was in.
But it was cheaper.
You were close as possible.
Oh, but we booked it because we were skint.
Yeah.
And all we were saving for America. And we were like, booked the cheapest hotel. It was about a 50-minute walk away, wasn't it? And the walls were so thin we could hear everything. Do you remember? It sounded like you said they sounded like there were charming snakes next door or something. They were so loud. And we did the 3 days, and then we said again, not going to be sold, not gonna be sold into anything. We know it's coming. And then they whacked us with this 26k thing, and we were like, nah, fuck it, let's just do it anyway.
Yeah.
And it was scary though, wasn't it?
It was. I remember coming home from it, and we said to me mum, this is what we're doing and all that sort of stuff. And interestingly or funny enough, she turned around and said, did you get a house with that, didn't she? Yeah. Did you get your first property included in that price? It
was an insane amount of money. And I remember that we were like, well, how do we afford it? how do we find that money?
It's when the mindset started to shift right then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There and then, to be honest.
A lot of people would think that we were mental, and they did think we were mental. So it was kind of like, well, we've got to go out and make it work now.
Yeah.
This isn't like a non-negotiable.
I think they still do. I think they probably still do think, wow, like that they're crazy.
Yeah.
But they're the same person. They're the same people that sort of come up to me in work and say, "How's it going? How many houses have you got?" and stuff like that. So, although they think we're mental, we are. And we're doing it. So it is.
We
what
are
it
mental.
is.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who goes into this lightly.
Because we're breaking the norm, aren't we?
And that's what people, I don't think, quite understand. I've got people in my life who still think I'm doing this as a hobby.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just doing a bit of homes under
bit
the
on the
hammer,
side.
bit on this bit of a side hustle, and
Yeah.
it's like, no, this is like my life now and my job. A lot of people are asking us about our first property and the challenges that we had with it. But actually, looking back, I think at the time it was like, oh my God, problem after problem. Do you remember the garden and the damp?
And now it's one of the best ones we've done.
And now it was money in, money out, and more, I think. So do you remember the figures? 50k purchase price.
50 purchase price.
And then the refurb
20 to 25.
is about just under 25, yeah.
Just under 25. Refinanced at... Go on.
We refinanced first at 95.
That's right.
And I think it left about £8,000 in the deal after fees and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then we got a grant from the council. So it's always worth, for beginners listening, it's always worth looking at what the councils can offer you as incentives, whether that's a low interest loan or a interest-free loan or even a grant. So we got a grant off Sunderland Council. I think they're one of the best councils in the country for working with landlords and wanting to bring properties up to standard. They issued us £1,000 for every year it had been empty. So we had been empty 4 years. So that left £4,000 in the deal. And then we refinanced after 2 years, which I wouldn't ever really recommend refinancing a property more than once. But we refinanced at 115. I think we pulled about 12 or 13 grand out. So yeah, eventually it was very much a money in, money out deal, and profit. But that's refinanced to the max now. So we just let that cash flow, and that cash flows about £6,000 net a year, not accounting for tax. But we had some challenges.
So how long have we owned it?
About 5 years now.
And we've had the same tenant in from the start?
Yeah, we've had the same tenant in from the start. We have never really raised the rent, but one thing that we're looking at across the portfolio now is making sure that the rents are in line with market rents, because unfortunately your tenants get hit with a big rental raise if it's not done incrementally, and it's not fair. You've got to think about it from an ethical point of view. But yeah, we've had pretty much the same tenants, and a lot of them. And they're great tenants. They look after the properties, and it is their home. You know, it's a nice thing I think it's a nice thing to do, regardless of the money that we make. We've got a question here as well about why was your first strategy buy to lets?
They're relatively straightforward. Any size property can be a buy to let, but when we refer to buy to lets, we refer to them as baby buy to lets. So 2 to 3 bed.
Yeah, terrace.
You know, that terrace
Semis.
or semis, but mainly terrace, that sort of size. So not huge properties, not huge refurbs, and obviously not a big footprint in terms of square footage to sort of work on or look after. And also they're relatively safe and secure. And what I mean by that is, what am I trying to say, Steph?
Well, the buy to let are relatively risk free, because if you buy them at the right price, and you can add value to them, whether that's through the transaction or the refurb. You know, if it's in an area that people want to live in, you're never really going to be in voids unless you've got some sort of changeover. And I think that's why they become relatively risk-free. And I say relatively with the caveat that you've got to do your numbers right, know your strategy. But for us, why buy to let? Cash flow ultimately for us.
Yeah, by safe and secure, I was thinking you haven't got a high turnover of tenants. So,
Yeah.
for example, like some HMOs, for example, will have a high turnover of tenants, and you're always wondering where your next tenant's coming from, and so on. So, if you get a good buy to let in the right area with the right management in place, in terms of your sort of letting agents and stuff like that, they should be finding you the type of tenant that's going to want to stay there long term. So you provide a property where they want to stay, and they provide you with a tenant that wants to stay, and that's the perfect combination.
Yeah, absolutely. So like somebody who would probably be like a whole of life renter, but again, that's okay, and we all win in that situation.
Yeah.
I've got a question here then, and I know what I would say. But is there anything that you wish you knew before we started investing in property? Everything.
Oh, that's a tough one, actually. What did you?
For me, I think one thing that I wish I'd known more about was capital appreciation.
Yeah, capital growth. I was just going to say that capital growth,
Yeah.
because let's be honest, we could have found properties of a similar calibre to what we bought in the northeast. We could have found them closer to home, and I wouldn't have had to travel as much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, crystal balls and that aside, obviously we didn't know about capital appreciation and just how much COVID would play a part in pent-up energy in the market and stuff like that on what's happened. But given what we know now, if we'd have bought property closer to home, and we know exactly the area, and you know the area I'm talking about, we would have higher value properties right now, I think, in terms of market value.
And that's the thing. It's like we wanted cash flow, so we bought in the northeast because the properties are cheaper in some areas. So ours are predominantly Sunderland and Durham. They're predominantly cheaper, and you get good cash flow from them, but you don't get the value. There were properties that we could have bought closer to home in the northwest where we're buying now, where they would have been a little bit more expensive. We would have got the same, if not more rent, but we would have also have had better growth. And and again, properties always go up, don't they? Like, they will always go up in value. They've all gone up in value. We forced appreciation on a lot of them as well. But if we'd have bought in an area that had better growth, we would have a double win there. We would have the cash flow, which would have been the same anyway, but we would have also had a property that's grown more in value, and we would have more options, which is why we now buy in the northwest. The northeast was all good and well, but we had a lot of travelling. We went there because we were advised to go there, and I think a lot of people do. But what we weren't looking at the beginning was that longer picture. Like, it was only 5-6 years ago. And we weren't looking at that 5-6 years time. We were looking at, right, I need cash flow now, because we've got that urgency to quit our jobs and replace that income, when in reality, we shouldn't have done that. Having said that, they all cash flow really well, and they're good properties, but we got them at the right price.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. So somebody's asked, why did we switch to serviced accommodation? Why did we get some of them in the portfolio? So people are saying, what's it like to be in business with your partner? Because obviously a lot of people get into this as couples. I know what I'd say working with you, but I'll answer it in a second. Stop looking at me like that. What's it like? I'm dreading what you're going to say now. What's it like working in business with me as your girlfriend?
Tense.
I can't possibly imagine why.
Tense.
Why?
Because you're like a drill instructor in the American Army. You're like that. What's that movie, Full Metal Jacket?
What?
You like that?
Can you elaborate and give me? I want a specific example.
You are very honest, and it's a good job that you are, because that's how we get shit done. That's how we get things done. because you're on it, because I'm so laid back. So I'm not saying it doesn't work, but what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
to answer the question personally, it's tense and it's tough for me because you're so regimental.
Okay, but if I wasn't, what would happen? Because do you remember, sometimes at night when you come into the office and you sit there and you like throw pieces of paper at me, or you sit there and I look up from a laptop and you've put the earphones up your nose, and
That
you do.
literally never happens.
It did happen because I've got a photo of it. So if I wasn't on it, we'd get nothing done.
I wouldn't let you take a photo of that.
You would be that kid in class that would just be the clown, and I would be sending you out the lesson. That's but I can't even do that because we both live in the same house. Okay, that's interesting. What's it like to work with you in business? I would say it's like trying to put a lid on a frog sometimes. But ultimately, we somehow have made it work, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be.
It probably works best because we're opposite.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. If we were both the same, we'd clash, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and you had actually more of an appetite for risk than I did.
Well, I do, yeah, because when we first started, when we first started our training, talking about bridging loans and stuff, I was like, you were really nervous and you almost felt sick, didn't you, when we started talking about bridging loans and
now we
that
bridge
sort of
everything.
thing. But now we've done it and we bridge everything. Remember that first time we did it, and I was like, look, follow the process, follow the method. It works. People have done it. There's no reason why we can't do it. We did it and it worked. So,
but that was on the first house. That was 50k. I think 25% we put in, which is about 12.5 grand.
Yeah.
So you're looking at 38 grand worth of a bridge, which is nothing. It is a lot of money, but in property, it's not.
Yeah.
And I was terrified, absolutely terrified.
I don't think it's the idea of bridging loans itself that get people nervous. It's just the high interest, because they're not used to.
Yeah.
They're not used to getting sort of products with that high sort of interest rate. But what you've got to remember is, yes, it's high interest, but it's short term.
And it's the exit.
Yeah.
It's the, oh my God, are we going to refinance in time? But as long as you're getting everything, all your ducks in a row, obviously there are things that you can't control, but generally, I mean, I only know one person in my whole network that went over a 12-month bridge. And again, worst case scenario, you pay the penalty and you go on another 12 months. It's not the end of the world, but it's the money that goes into it. And it can sometimes kill the deal. But it's also a really, really good avenue for obtaining a property. It's quick, easy cash, isn't it? And I really think bridging it's got its place. And I think it's a really savvy product if you use it correctly. Safely and correctly, and your exits. So a lot of people are saying, why did we switch to service accommodation?
The reason, personally, I wanted to do service accommodations because we like going away. We like our weekends away, whether it be in this country or abroad. It makes no difference, really. And when we used to go into these, when we still go into these service accommodations, and we think, oh, that's quirky, that's nice. We always thought an element of it, we could do that. We like quirkiness. We like, making things stand out, quirky, different to the norm, where you just go into a property and it's been freshly plastered and everything's nice and straight and everything like that. There's no, although they're nice and they're clean and they're fresh and they're modern, there's no character to them.
Yeah.
And that's where we wanted to really say, right, okay, let's put our stamp on it.
Do you remember that? Do you remember that one we stayed in Bristol and it had a stormtrooper?
The stormtrooper mannequin thing.
Yeah. Do you remember we come in absolutely trashed we went out with Sue and Dave and
the Joneses.
Sean, and we went out with the Joneses.
They know who they are.
And we come in, we've been on the bloody merry-go-round with them and everything. We were absolutely pissed. And I walked in, forgot the stormtrooper was there. I think I bumped into him, shit myself and apologised. Do you remember? I was that drunk.
Yeah.
The service accommodation for me, I like things that are different, especially when we go away and stay in Airbnbs. But it was the high cash flow for me, or higher cash flow.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people don't realise with service accommodation is the cash flow's really got to be there, because unless you're self-managing, you can pretty much cut your revenue in half, 50 to 60%. But it depends on your numbers, it depends on the areas. Our favourite one is Smuggler's Cove. which is in Amble in Northumberland. So have a little look. Hashtag Smugglers Cove Northumberland. It's very much, I designed it myself and I'm really proud of it. We've got bespoke furniture in there, haven't we? You and me, although I did a bit of sanding and staining to your...
Your efforts of sanding, if that's what you call sanding.
No, it wasn't quite smooth. But anyway, I had a good go. So we bespoke, they were made to measure bespoke bedside tables, dressing tables, dining table, shelves, the
yeah.
mantelpiece. And then I found these tea chests on Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah.
One was from like 1932, I think. And I upcycled them and you put some wood on top to make them into tables. Everything in there was so unique. There's even a little treasure hunt in there for kids, which is my my greatest achievement in that property. But it's based on smuggling in the northeast coast, which I think is important.
And it's nice. It's nice to hear like the cleaner who does a great job of cleaning that property, and you know, and the people who manage that property say to us and give us feedback to say they love going there to clean it because it's so unique and there's nothing like it, and that's exactly why we did it. For me anyway, that's exactly what we wanted to achieve when we set out and bought that property. Yeah, you know,
it's a nice space, isn't it? It's beautiful, and I can't believe I look at it sometimes and I'm like, I can't believe we've designed that. It's something else, but we had a lot of challenges with that. It was really tough. Do you remember the wall fell down in the yard? Like Chris just like touched it, it just crumbled. We had that. We had a few issues with that property, didn't we? But ultimately, it's a cracking little house. It's done really well. People are asking as well. I mean, if you've got another question there, I think from people.
So similar question really, but why social housing? Why have we delved into social housing as well as a strategy?
Well, why not? I know I have an idea what you might think of this, but social housing, I think we both we're very similar in that we both want to make sure that we are giving back, and that's important. Yes, we make money from social housing, maybe not always as much as we would with private buy-to-let. Some of them we do, some of them we don't, and it's very much like a personal business decision for us. But it's relatively passive. It's more passive than buy-to-lets. However, we've got some lessons learned there, haven't we? I think what we didn't realise when we ventured into social housing, whether that's with charities, CICs, councils, other businesses basically that would supported living, these people aren't property experts, are they? They're not property professionals. They might not necessarily see a property defect like we would, and we know all too well with one of ours one of them in Durham has had a few issues with it, and we now inspect that property every year because we appreciate the job that they do as a charity, and you know how we work with them. We'd never take the property off them, but we know that they're not property professionals in the way that they don't view the houses and monitor them in the same way that we do. So that's just a small price to pay for guaranteed rent. So we still work, but on it. It's not truly passive, but it's more passive than most. Some people are saying, I'm worried. I'm worried I won't get a reliable builder. What if I get a cowboy builder?
They're out there. They're most definitely out there. We've come across them. We've encountered them. It's not always cowboy builders, it's cowboy tradesmen as well. Try and do your research on due diligence on the builders before you hire them. I know we've been viewing properties in certain investment areas and seen building work or builders' vans parked up outside other houses on the street or nearby, and we've literally pulled over, haven't we, to go in to speak to the builder to say, can I have a look? Very cheekily, but you know, if they want the business, generally they're more than happy to let you have a look at their refurb that they're doing, and you can gauge pretty quickly the quality of the tradesmen and the builders in that property by number one, how they conduct themselves. You know, for example, I've seen roofers drinking on the job.
On our roof.
Yeah, on our own roof.
On our own house.
Which isn't a great combination. So you can quickly sort of determine, how they conduct themselves, even the vehicles that they're in, the standard of the vehicles that they're driving and stuff like that, as well, as an indication. Is it relatively tidy, even though there's a refurb going on and they might be knocking plaster off the walls and ripping cables out and stuff? At the end of the day, do they tidy up before they leave? To some extent, I'm not saying it's got to be spotless and scrubbed, but obviously to some extent, do they tidy up after themselves?
How do they speak to you as well, on how you said about how they conduct themselves, but I think it's how they speak to you as well as the owner and how they work with you. That's important as well. So how are you going to communicate with them? Is it going to be by email? Is it going to be by text? Do they have a schedule of work? Have you got a contract in place? Have you got a payment schedule? Have you got conditions for when you will release payment to them?
If you're discussing a refurb with a builder, and let's say it's not just, can you skim some plaster on that wall for me and maybe that one, and we'll have a window put in there. If you're talking about proper refurbs, 20 grand plus refurbs, if you're walking around with a builder who's not writing notes down, taking photos,
measuring,
making lists and stuff like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. You're just going through the refurb at that point. You're not actually getting a formal quote together. You're just giving them an idea of what works you need doing, on a certain time scale maybe. Then that's a bit of a red flag. From what we've learned, that's a bit of a red flag, because all you're going to do then is have a builder go in, start a refurb, and it'll be, what are we doing here again, or what are we doing there again? You're going to get all them messages, and the worst case scenario is they do something. For example, a fireplace that you want a nice big opening, and you literally draw it on the wall as to what you want, and then you do a site visit in a couple of weeks' time, and there's this pokey little hole.
You couldn't fit a borrower in it.
In the bottom that you wouldn't get a shoebox in, and that's not what you wanted. So then all that plastering that they've done and everything over the top of it has to come off again and get redone and everything, which means, all right, a good builder will own up and say, sorry, I got that wrong, I didn't understand, which is fine, but it's still time, making more mess when time is money, and you want that refurb done as soon as possible.
And it costs more.
That's small attention to detail aspects that a good builder will have.
But it's about your communication with them. They should have. It's your communication with them as well. I remember when we first started, I wouldn't go on site without you, because as a woman as well, and obviously we knew what we were doing from our house, and I knew what it took to take a house back to brick and put it back together again. But even as a woman, it's just the room's full of men. Usually really lovely men, to be fair, but there was a time on a couple of projects I wouldn't go to site without you. There was one flip that we were doing up in, was it Sunderland or Durham? I can't remember which one. And it was a couple of years ago, and I had to drive up on my own to the northeast, and I walked in on site, and the project manager hadn't told the guys that there was the plasterer, there was the electrician, there was someone ripping the garden out, there was a guy doing the plumbing. Everybody was there. They were all working, to be fair, but the project manager, who wasn't there, hadn't told these guys that I was coming. And I walked in on site, and it's probably not the first, but the first one that I'd been in on my own, probably, and I was doing the project pretty much on my own as well, because you were working and what have you, where I was just surrounded by all these men, and they didn't know who I was. At least on the other projects I've been to by myself, they knew who I was, but we had a different project manager, and they all just kind of looked at me as if I had two or 10 heads, as if to say, well, you don't quite belong here. My accent carries a bit of weight in the northeast, actually, because I don't know what it is, but the Geordies and I shouldn't call them Geordies if they're from Sunderland, should I? Definitely not. I'm sorry. But the Easterners and the Scousers, I'm a plastic Scouser, there's always a bit of an affinity with us. I don't know what it is. So we always end up getting on really well. But yeah, it was unfamiliar. I will say, choosing a builder as well, you can do your due diligence. You can go and visit the sites that they're doing. You can even speak to some of their clients. You can see their recommendations. We've worked with someone who come through recommendation, VAT VAT registered construction company, did everything right, didn't they? Ticked all the boxes. Yeah, all right, they're VAT registered. We'll pay a bit more, but we'll get a better service. I had a project manager. Let's face it, they were a pile of shite, weren't they?
Yeah,
This was a 40k refurb and a flip.
it's one of the worst, wasn't it?
It was one of the worst ever. So you can do all that due diligence and you can see what they're capable of. But until they've actually done that work for you, you can't ever vouch for them. So there will always be times when you encounter problems with builders. All I would say is just have the confidence, learn, know what you're doing. And if you have to learn more about building and property defects, I would say pay a surveyor. Find someone who, even a retired one, you know, we've got an amazing retired Rick surveyor in the Northeast who wouldn't trust with anybody, wouldn't trust anyone else, would we, to go and survey the properties? But find someone, go pay them a day rate, go and learn about buildings, go and learn about property defects with them so that you feel confident. But obviously you don't go into a purchase without knowing the work's needed anyway.
That's actually a really valuable and good idea, because a lot of people, I think, get a property or go into property and it's great, you know, they've the finances are in order and stuff like that, but they don't necessarily know what a good refurb looks like.
Yeah.
For example, a plastered wall, you know, if it, you know,
well, if it doesn't look like glass,
yeah,
I'm not having it.
I mean, there's looking like glass, but there's just being flat, isn't there? And not like, you know, all wavy and not very neat on the corners and stuff like that. So it's just little things, you know, like that. You need to know what a decent refurb and a decent quality of finish looks like. All right, we're only let's say we're talking buy to lets. You know, they do say, oh, you get a buy to let finish, but you know what's a good standard and what you paid for should be a good standard and what isn't.
Yeah.
And then no one can pull the wool over your eyes then. Yeah,
because a flip standard will always be better and different to a buy to let standard, but that doesn't mean we can't provide good quality homes for people. I won't have it. Do you remember, again, that one with that construction company? Do you remember we walked in and it was like a spider web? It was all cracked. There was one wall that was wavy. It looked like the sea. And I was like, absolutely not. Yeah. We ended up reverting that to a buy-to-let in the end, didn't we? And I thought, right, well, someone's going to live here. It's all going to be put... someone's going to live there anyway, but we're going to make sure that we bring it up to like the highest possible standard as a buy-to-let. And a lot of builders would say, oh, it's only a buy-to-let. I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that. It's only a buy-to-let. Yeah, but this is going to be someone's home. Yeah. Someone's actually going to live there. And we've got one more question then, and it was if we could do it all over again, even with the mistakes we made, would you still do it all over again with the mistakes we made? Yeah, I would too.
Yeah. I'd never wish to go back, or there's not a lot, to be fair. I say, oh, well, we shouldn't have done that, or I wish we hadn't have done that, because the mistakes that we've made and the bumps in the road that we've encountered and we've overcome, it's all, if you think about it, it's not just the monetary value of it. Education.
Yeah, it's knowledge.
Taking the learnings from it. Yeah. Jumping over the negatives, riding the wave of the negatives, and then taking the positives at the end, and what we've learned from doing that. All right, it's cost us money to learn them, from them mistakes, but it's like doing the lottery, innit? You've got to be in it to win it. You've got to be.
I don't gamble in it, but yeah.
Well, it's not gambling, is it? It's just you've got to be in that race. Yeah. You've got to be in and among that business, that area, that sector, that community.
Those people who do it.
These big sites that do these big developments, don't think for 1 minute they don't make mistakes and come across things that they've missed, and all that sort of stuff. It's it's just like the same with any business, isn't it?
But this is why we help other people as well. Like, this is how I got into mentoring people. Not that we made massive costly mistakes. It's not about what you've lost, it's about what you've learned. But we can now help people avoid those things because we've actually gone through it.
Well, one of the main triggers was how many people come to us and said, I'm thinking about doing this, or can I have a chat? How do I get into this? How many people come to us and asked, I'd like to do that. And the trigger was, because the first response is, we recommend that you get educated in some way, shape or form. Go to whoever you want for that, but you need to get educated, on the basics.
Yeah, and this is why people come to us, don't they? And they say, hey, can you help us do like a 10-bed HMO? Or can you help us do service accommodation? I'm like, no.
We can't. Someone can, but
Someone
we can't.
else can, but I won't.
Yeah.
I won't do that because it wouldn't be ethically right.
Yeah.
And I won't even work with people now. I mean, we've had conversations with people that you've worked with and friends and stuff like that. If I don't think anybody's ready or don't have the right mindset, I'm not there to convince people.
Yeah.
I'm there to help them build a solid, safe foundation. We started with buy-to-let and little flips. You can't go wrong with them. We're obviously doing bigger, I wouldn't say better, but we're doing bigger deals now that do involve a lot more risk, but we're at a point now where we're safe enough in our own knowledge and network and business acquaintances and partners to do that.
Yeah.
But you've got to keep yourself safe at the beginning. If you can't do the basics, I had someone on a call with me the other day who was interested in the Path to Property programme. So for those of you who don't know, Property School is launching at the end of Jan, and my Path to Property programme will be part of the Property School. And she said, I really fancy Airbnbs. And I said, well, what does your buy-to-let portfolio look like? I knew full well she didn't have a buy-to-let portfolio. I said, what does that look like? And she said, well, I haven't got any. I said, okay, so if you imagine it as a pyramid, I said, and the further you go up that pyramid, the higher you get, the sexier it gets, the more money you make, but the riskier it is as well. Yep. I said, and as you go up that pyramid, you've got service accommodation or Airbnb around about here at the top or near the top, maybe in the middle. I said, but what's holding it up? I said, if you've not got a solid foundation of cash flow or capital from your from your flips to hold that up, what happens in the winter months when you've got no occupancy? Yeah. I said, what's paying the bills? What's paying the mortgage? Yeah. One of our Airbnbs, we know, costs us about £900 a month before we've even made any profit at all. Yeah. So what pays for that? Well, the bottom of the pyramid here, we've got a solid foundation of baby buy-to-lets and social housing and so on that filters that feeds through to that those Airbnbs in the winter months when they're empty, and that's what a lot of people don't realise. It's like the same with all this rent to rent stuff. Oh, I don't need money to get into it. Well, you do. Of course you do. Of course you need some money. Yeah. What about when the boiler goes? What about when you have to do maintenance repairs? What about your legal fees when you're coming up with a contract? Yeah. You need money to hold things up.
Yeah, or with SAs, it could be anything. Like someone leaves the bath running and you get a flood in the property, or none of ours have big trees next to them, but if a tree comes down, it's all that sort of stuff where you're going to have a period of voids.
Yeah, to sort it out.
Yeah, where you need to think of your backup.
Do you remember the flats we were buying in? I won't say the place, but we were buying 2 flats for service accommodation, weren't we? And do you remember all that work that the guy was doing on the freeholder at the back? And we thought, right, well, if all of that structural work needs to be done, how are we actually going to rent these flats out? That we will, and the insurance might cover that. Yeah. But yeah, it's challenging. For anyone wanting to get into property, I would say get educated, like you've just said, Phil. Come to me, obviously, because I teach it in a very safe and structured way, like a teacher with a full curriculum. So if you want to give us a follow, it's at Steph, the property teacher, and on Instagram, and you can visit www.property-school.com. Path to Property is launching in January, and I can't wait to have you. Thank you to my other half for coming on my podcast. Although thank me. Although every day you get a podcast from me, now it's just official.
Yeah, whether it's on WhatsApp or verbally. Yeah.
You lucky duck. Thanks, everyone.